The push is on to let your child's school go remote again. But will lawmakers change their minds? Plus, fraud, long wait times. Lawmakers have heard your complaints and take your questions about the battered unemployment system to the source. But first, a teen's death in Wichita sparking questions and maybe changes to the law in Topeka. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. Welcome to Kansas Week. I'm your host, Pilar Pedraza. It's a case that sparked headlines for weeks here in Wichita. Now a call for change from a Sedgwick County commissioner and a Wichita pastor. Wichita police used the RAP system on 17-year-old Cedric Lofton, saying he was combative when they took him into custody. But should they have? KAKE's Jackson Overstreet takes a look.
Come on, where's that rap at?
This video is from the night Cedric Lofton was taken to the Sedgwick County Juvenile Intake Center. You can see him here being put into a restraint system by Wichita police officers called the RAP.
It should be banned 100%. There's no reason for this device to ever be used.
Lofton being put into the RAP is just one of the many issues that spokesperson for the Lofton family, Pastor Mo, says they have taken issue with from the night the 17-year-old was taken into JIAC custody.
For someone to be bound in such a way and to not take into consideration any physical or health issues, we need to stop that type of policing immediately.
Pastor Mo is not the only person who thinks the RAP should be banned.
He was clearly in mental health crisis.
Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell spoke in front of the Kansas House Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice on Thursday. He wants lawmakers to amend a current juvenile justice reform bill so that using the RAP would be banned in Kansas.
It adds to the anxiety. It makes the crisis worse. It may be good for police officers. It's bad for the person that's in crisis.
As well as the use of the prone position, which is what ultimately injured Lofton while at JIAC. Pastor Mo says government officials pushing for change because of what happened to Lofton is exactly what community leaders have been asking for.
The reality is that actions like this are what need to be done.
And joining me today to review the week's events at the State House by Zoom, we have Republican Representative Troy Waymaster from Bunker Hill. And here on the desk with me, we have Democratic Representative Casey O'Hibison from Wichita. Welcome to you both.
Thank you,
and
Laura.
Casey, you're from the Wichita area. I am going to start with you. This is an issue that is extremely complicated. There are several different kind of angles involved and possible changes in the law there. Do you see it something that's going to gain hold and maybe move through the system in Topeka?
Well, yes, and thank you very much, and thank you for bringing up this particular issue. Yes, there is already momentum with respect to address what happened to Cedric in regards to how he was treated when he was in the custody. I do want to commend Representative Owens, because both of us have talked, and he's agreed to have a hearing in his committee with respect to the Stand Your Ground law that that exists right now in Sedgwick County. But I think there is momentum. I think the House Speaker has made commitment to take a look at it. At the same time, the governor has called for the DCF to investigate. But it goes beyond that. It goes. I kind of lean towards what Lacey Cruz has talked about, to have some kind of independent audit as to the stuff that transpired to Cedric. I'm also going to push for to have a special prosecutor, because what happened to that gentleman shouldn't have happened. And it's not like he was a threat to anybody. He didn't have no gun, no knife, no nothing. And to see how he was treated, I think, personally, I think his civil rights were violated. And again, I just want to reserve judgment, but I would like to see for an independent investigation to happen to make sure that stuff like this doesn't happen again.
What to you would qualify as an independent investigation? Because many people would consider the DCF review to be an independent one.
Well, we have to, yeah, true. And at the same time, I think that the Attorney General can actually appoint one. I also think that even the federal government can come in and step in to say that, his civil rights were violated. Again, just look at the way he was treated. No one should be treated like that. And for us to continue to see such treatments to juveniles like that should be uncalled for. And again, I commend the legislature, especially Representative Owens. He's agreed to hear it, and we should get something through hopefully this year to address this.
And you said Representative Owens has agreed to hear it. Now, he was on the show last week. We talked with him and Representative Carmichael about the stand your ground laws, and certainly he was talking a lot about that. But so is he talking about a change to the stand your ground law or the RAP?
In regards to the hearing in the corrections committee, he's going to have a hearing on it later on this session. So we'll wait to see what comes out of that. But I've talked to him, and he said he will have a hearing on it.
So exactly what that may constitute is still kind of up in the air.
That's correct.
All right. And Troy, I'm going to bring you in on this very quickly here. Obviously, outside of your area out in western Kansas, but that kind of begs the question. It's something here in Wichita, lots of people talking about. Is it something that folks outside of the Wichita area are really kind of starting to get a feel for or care about?
Well, I think there's been discussion because even though I do reside in central and western Kansas, our market is the Wichita market. And so when we watch the nightly news back at our homes, we've been hearing about the horrific details of what happened to Cedric. And obviously, since the video was released, I think it's preempted a lot of discussion. Obviously, there was a KBI investigation as well. And then, I served in the House with Commissioner Howell. And when he was talking about the RAP restraining system, maybe that's something we do need to look at. I did hear directly from Chairman Owens that he was going to be having a hearing in regards to this. Of course, as you mentioned before, he's the chairman of the Corrections and Juvenile Justice System Committee. So yeah, I mean, the discussion is out there. I just saw it on the news last night when I returned back home from Topeka. They were still following up with this on the news out of Wichita. So it's obviously carried not only in the Wichita area, but throughout many parts of the state, just because that's where we receive our news from.
Casey?
I just also want to add, and I also want to agree with Representative Waymaster, that this is a discussion that we're going to have, and one thing that we need to focus on is mental health. The availability of people trying to seek that have some kind of mental problem, for them to actually be helped, anywhere that they actually go into any facility. So we need to focus on that. Hopefully this session in terms of addressing mental health issues here in our state. What transpired with Cedric shouldn't have happened, and we need to do everything in our power on the state level to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and I'm going to end it on this note. We have some groups like Progeny that are pushing for complete overhauls to a certain extent of juvenile justice because of this and because of the mental health issues that you're talking about.
That's correct.
So definitely not an issue folks are going to let lie. And I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Right now, we're going to move on. After weeks of delays, lawmakers finally heard from the Kansas Department of Labor this week about what it's doing following the delay on unemployment claims during the pandemic. KAKE's Hannah Baker listened in and spoke with lawmakers after the meeting to get their thoughts.
With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. I will stand for questions.
Thursday, the Secretary of the Kansas Department of Labor gave an update to lawmakers on its modernization plan. It comes after a disastrous couple of years. During the COVID pandemic, thousands of people waited for months for unemployment claims, and the department reported millions of dollars in fraud.
We're currently having an uptick in fraud. The increase we're talking about here is maybe about 1,000 to 1,500 a week, not in the tens of thousands we saw when we had a much more serious fraud surge. So,
Deputy Secretary for KDOL Peter Brady says right now the department is continuing to update and improve its internal processes, and with a new modernization system, it will help even more, which the department says will hopefully be finished by the end of the year.
When we were fighting the levels of fraud was much more challenging, but we've put in place better processes to do so, to get those eligible individuals to benefits quicker.
The system in place hasn't been updated since 2002, something the state wants fixed immediately.
I have a question.
State House Representative Stephanie Clayton, who serves on the Unemployment Modernization and Improvement Council, says she's been in constant communication with KDOL and Kansas residents about their concerns during this process.
We're at a time where we're experiencing a major shift and a lot of turmoil in our economy, most notably with our labor force.
And while she says she thinks they have a better handle on the issues now, there's still room for improvement.
And Kansas lawmakers are hearing more about this last week. I know many have told me they're still getting a lot of complaints. I'm still getting a lot of complaints. Troy, I'm going to start with you. You also got a presentation from the Department of Labor on this issue in one of your committees. What did you think?
Yeah, we did. Just yesterday, we had both the Secretary Schultz and also the Deputy Secretary Peter Brady come in and address the Appropriations Committee on pretty much what is going on with the Department of Labor. And just, a few days before that, I've been contacted with citizens in my district who are experiencing, and they own businesses or they run organizations where they were seeing an increase in fraudulent activity again with the Kansas Department of Labor. And so we were talking about, one, the status of the Unemployment Trust Fund, the modernization project that's going on with the Department of Labor, because as you mentioned, it has been modernized for almost 20 years. And that could be a cause and a reason for the reason why we had so much fraudulent activity going on. But the other is addressing the fraudulent activity that we're experiencing now, and then making sure that Kansans that have legitimate claims for their unemployment benefits and make sure that they're being paid. That was the biggest issue that we saw going on for about 18 months now, is that we had legitimate claims from individuals in the state of Kansas where they weren't able to get through to the Department of Labor. They would talk to us. There were many times that I was in contact with our legislative liaison with the Kansas Department of Labor in trying to address their concerns. And some of it was asking for more information that they've already sent in. And I think the antiquated system was part of it. Obviously, the fraudulent activity was another issue that we need to address, which maybe the modernization of the unemployment system would help address that. But we got to keep in mind that there was almost $700 million paid out in fraudulent activity from the Unemployment Trust Fund that we're never going to get back in most cases, because most of that was out of the country. And so we just need to address a whole bunch of other issues. One other thing that I would like to mention is that I'm going to be the chairperson of the advisory panel for the Strengthening People and Revitalizing Kansas for Modernization and Government Efficiency. And one thing we're going to talk about is all of the systems that we have statewide. What can we do to modernize these systems that we have with the state of Kansas and use those American Rescue Plan money for updating and modernizing our system? I do want to say right now, with the briefing that we had yesterday with the Kansas Department of Labor, is that the Unemployment Trust Fund is solvent. It has a balance of about $670 million. And that greatly adds to what we were in a position in when COVID-19 happened in 2020, where we had an unemployment trust system that it had over $1 billion in the trust fund. And so we were very well positioned, unlike some other states, where when the pandemic happened, we were able to use the amount of money that was in the trust fund, although it did go down considerably. And we put additional money into it last legislative session. But there are many states who had to resort to taking out a loan with the federal government in order to pay their unemployment benefits, which we did not have to do.
One more question for you, Troy, and then we need to move on. But yes. Is there any solution for those folks who have legitimate claims but have been caught up in this fraudulent situation?
Well, I'd say the one thing that's very frustrating for constituents of mine that have reached out to me is that when they file a claim with the Kansas Department of Labor, it almost seems like everybody is categorized as being fraud. And so they have to send all this documentation in order to get that fraud cleared. And it's been taking weeks and in some cases months to get that fraud cleared off of their account, and then actually talking to a caseworker to make sure that the benefits are going to be paid out. I mean, they have reached out to me, and like I mentioned, I have forwarded that on to the legislative liaison. Julie McGinney is her name, and we commended her in committee yesterday because I think she is the one that of a lot of us have reached out to when our constituents were having issues with the Kansas Department of Labor. And she would reach out to those constituents, get those issues resolved, and get their benefits paid out. But it is frustrating for constituents when they immediately send in a claim and it's categorized as fraud.
All right, thank you on that, Troy. We're going to move forward here. A Kansas lawmaker wants to give schools more flexibility to switch to remote learning during COVID outbreaks this year. But as KMUW's Suzanne Perez shows us, the measure isn't likely to get far.
Kansas legislators passed a measure last spring that limits students to 40 hours of online instruction, or schools lose some state funding. It was a message to districts that kids should be in school in person. Democratic Representative Jared Ousley says that law didn't anticipate a lingering pandemic that has led to widespread teacher shortages and school closures. This week, Ousley introduced a bill to do away with the 40-hour limit.
Having the option for the school districts to go to remote versus close the building seems like a viable option, a good tool in the toolbox that we took away from them last year.
Ousley says he thinks the bill has bipartisan support, but it's unlikely to get through a heavily conservative K-12 budget committee. For KMUW News, I'm Suzanne Perez.
And in the print article format of that article, Suzanne quoted the representative as saying he didn't think I think it was a rat's chance of passing. From your perspective, is this a solution to the problem school districts are having? Is there another solution out there that might have a better chance of getting through the legislature?
Well, this is the only solution I can see right now because, of course, no one anticipated that the Omicron virus is going to has shut down so many schools in El Dorado, Fort Scott, Pittsburgh. You know, people have shut down elementary schools. These districts have shut down some elementary schools, and the only option left is for them to do online learning. So that's the only solution I can see right this particular time. That's the only reasonable one I see. But if there's any other proposal out there, of course I'm open to it. But I think we need to focus on something that's working, something that's immediate right now to make sure that children are learning, regardless of this pandemic that we're in right now.
Yeah. Hey, Troy, what about you? Do you see either this or some other resolution coming out of the legislature that can help schools deal with the current situation?
I don't know if I see this, but there might be some type of resolution because if you look at, and as Representative Ousley mentioned, we didn't anticipate an ongoing pandemic. And we did see a lot of schools within the last month, especially I think it was after the Christmas vacation, when they resumed schools. A lot of teachers, students had come down with COVID-19 and a lot of those schools closed. Now, currently, it's 40 hours of remote learning, and the reason why we did that is because we heard from a lot of parents who wanted their students to go back, their children to go back to school, as opposed to the remote learning that occurred in late 2020 during the school year. And our test scores have actually reflected that. The learning for the students actually went down throughout the state of Kansas when we resorted to remote learning. And that's why there was a restriction on how much a school district can utilize as far as remote learning, because we want our students to learn.
And one other option that I've heard is a cut in the number of hours schools have to meet so that they can cancel classes a little bit more frequently. Is that something that you could see moving forward?
Possibly. I mean, this is kind of like a learn as you go kind of approach. There is no perfect solution. Of course, educators and experts have to come in together to find out what is the best route for our kids to learn. And of course, I agree. We need to do more with respect to making sure that areas that don't have online remote learning, have access, in terms of expanding, whether it's broadband, access to some of these school districts. But online remote learning right now is actually, I see, the best solution, so that we can actually educate our kids. And
a quick note that a change in the total number of hours required would probably have to go through the State Board of Education, not through the State House.
That's correct.
So there's that as well. Let's turn to the fight over redistricting now. A controversial new congressional map is on its way to the governor's desk. We go to Rebecca Chung from the KSN Capitol Bureau for details.
Some are calling it gerrymandering.
It would take away our voting strength.
Others fear their voice won't be heard.
I don't believe that these maps would create a fair chance for my community to have the representation that it wants.
A split drawn in a new voting map is at the center of it all. The map takes the northern half of Wyandotte County out of the state's swing congressional district in Kansas City, removing Democratic voters from a district represented by Sharice Davids, the only Kansas Democrat in Congress. Republicans say it's the best way to handle a district that's now overpopulated.
This is math. You look at it. There's many different ways to look at the problem and the solution, and this is just one of those ways.
But opponents argue that it's targeting Democrats, a push from Republicans to limit the minority voice and secure a spot as the only party representing the state in Congress.
It will do irreparable harm to Johnson County and Wyandotte counties, not just them, but nearly every urban district across the state of Kansas for the next decade.
And Troy, I'm going to start with you on this one because you're part of the majority party.
Yes.
This passed with 79 votes in the House, not a veto-proof majority, but I understand there were several people who were absent. Do you see this surviving a veto if the governor vetoes it?
Yeah, there were quite a few members who were out during the 4.5 hour long debate that we had in regards to redistricting the congressional maps earlier this week. So I think the numbers, if everybody would be in attendance for a veto override, we would be successful in overriding the governor's veto. You know, Representative Croft, or Chairman Croft, who I was speaking on the video, is exactly right. Redistricting is a mathematical issue, and we have to make sure that all the congressional districts have a zero deviation and equal in all 4 of the congressional districts. What I'd like to say is, luckily we still have our 4 congressional districts. There was a lot of thought earlier on when the census was going to be coming out, and prior to those numbers coming out, is that we could possibly lose one. So I'm just thankful that we still have 4 members of Congress, and when we're trying to figure out the maps. But he's exactly right. It comes down to the numbers, and the first, the second, all lost population within the last 10 years. The fourth, there were some adjustments that needed to be made, but they were pretty close to where the numbers needed to be. But the third was by far well over the population numbers in that district, and so those numbers had to be adjusted. And I know in the urban areas of the Kansas City metropolitan area, when they had the meetings, they said they wanted Wyandotte and Johnson to be together. But mathematically, that's impossible because that district grew by so many people.
Yeah. Casey, what about you? I mean, there have definitely been threats of a lawsuit if this one goes through. Can this map survive?
Well, it's yet to be seen. And of course, Representative Waymaster will agree with me that during that 4.5 hour debate, we saw all kinds of maps from somebody trying to put Wichita in some parts of Wichita into the 1st district. Some people trying to put Cedric County, drawing all the maps all the way to the Missouri border. We saw all kinds of maps. I'm surprised that no one actually presented a map whereby they were going to add probably like central Kansas, including Russell, into 4th district. I mean, that was possible. It would have been, to get the numbers. But the bottom line is the map fair? Is it a representation of what the people wanted? And, some will tell you that no. I mean, of course, you take a look at Wyandotte County and Johnson County. For years, they've been in one district, going back many years, and all of a sudden they're just splitting it up. This is pretty much a prime example of gerrymandering, and this is something that has caused problems not only for our state but throughout the United States, whereby the majority party has tried to gerrymander people out that that'll benefit their particular party. And I'm not talking just only here in Kansas, but across the United States. I have said for many years now that we need an independent body that actually will draw maps, whereby it's nonpartisan. It will be actually be fair and equal to both sides. And we'll wait to see if the governor will actually sign the bill.
No. Well, and as far as the gerrymandering, the Supreme Court has ruled in a couple of cases, I believe out of Georgia, if I remember correctly, that maps that experts pretty much agreed were gerrymandered could stand. So the possible successes of a lawsuit.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. Yep. I mean, of course, it's still this. That's just the first part of the ball game, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yep. All right. Well, finally today, do you know the difference between chicken and chicken? The Kansas Ag Committee is worried you won't at the grocery store and wants to cut down on what it terms misbranded products. KAKE's Jessica Crawford takes a look.
Kansas lawmakers are some of the latest across the country to cook up legislation targeting meat and dairy alternatives.
There are some folks that are confused. It was not clearly labeled.
This week, the Committee on Agriculture introduced House Bill 2530. It says a food will be considered misbranded, in part, if it is an imitation of another food, unless it prominently says it's an imitation. Failure to comply could be costly for companies that make meat and dairy alternatives.
There would probably be some fines. There would be request to pull it off the shelf and get it relabeled.
Manufacturers of plant-based foods have filed lawsuits in the face of these types of laws in several states, including Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. As plant-based foods grow in popularity, Rajas says the labeling on food packaging is top of mind for ranchers.
This is a kind of a grassroots thing that came from farmers and ranchers that go to the grocery store and they see this, and I think their curiosity is such that, you know, anytime you have competition, you want to check it out.
And Troy, I'm going to start with you. This is something Ken said that he, from rural Kansas, has heard from farmers and ranchers. Are you hearing this as well?
I am. Obviously, in the last few years, we've seen an influx of plant-based foods going either into our grocery stores or going into our restaurants and fast foods. And so I think a lot of them are concerned that there would be this confusion when one is going to the grocery store and thinking that they're buying actual beef, but it's actually a plant-based. And I don't have any problem at all with labeling food to what they are. If it's natural beef, let's label it as natural beef or natural chicken. If it's plant-based, I see no difference as to why that could be labeled as plant-based food. They do the same thing in the advertising. I just saw one for Kentucky Fried Chicken where they have a plant-based chicken that they're going to be advertising. Burger King did that with one of their plant-based hamburgers. I mean, so they clearly identify in their restaurants that they have plant-based foods. I think we should be able to do that in our grocery stores as well, because some are going to be using plant-based foods for a healthier option, but others are going to want the natural beef and chicken and pork.
Yeah. And Casey, this is an issue that has gained a lot of traction in rural states like Kansas. But what about those concerns about lawsuits that we're also seeing in states that have already passed laws like this?
Well, I would say and I agree with my colleague. Of course, here. People who go into grocery stores, if they want to know the difference between, plant-based or any other, I mean, they should have a right to know that. And of course, I agree with the chair of the Ag Committee. Of course, it's something that our farmers protect our farmers and actually farmers within the Midwest. So it's a step in the right direction, I should say, that the legislature is taking on it.
All right, so it sounds like at least here on this set, in this show, we have agreement on this issue.
That's correct.
And we're going to leave that there. One of the few things that we see agreement in, well, I can't say few because there are many things that you guys agree on. 98%, I believe, of legislation is bipartisan. I'm betting it's also going to include some Chiefs legislation this year, right?
That is correct. And I believe my good friend, Representative Waymaster, will agree with me that this weekend is going to be a big game. Last week, we're 13 seconds back, and in the fourth quarter, and we still found a way to pull it off, so at least we can find compromise on that.
All right. And we are going to end on that note. Thank you both, Troy and Casey, for joining us this week. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion. We'd love to hear what you think or your ideas for future shows. Just email us at kansasweek@kpts.org. For now, stay safe and have a great week.